Lead me to green pastures, send me the right pastor. Jesus is always faster than certain disaster, solving every matter, silencing the chatter. Jesus, cover me so that all is seen is your glory. I need the blood. I need the blood of Jesus. I need the blood. I hear his word. My God stays up for me. My God stays up. Jesus doesn't have to sleep. I hear the Lord. I hear the Lord speaking. I hear the Lord. I believe his word. My God stays up for me. My God stays up. Jesus doesn't have to sleep because, because, because he loved me. Because he loved me. I call on his name. I call Jesus. I call on his name. I call on his name. I call Jesus. I call on his name because he came to save me. Because he loved me. Because he loved me. I have a plethora of things that I've written that I would have liked to share with the church. But alas, I'm on YouTube, like so many others. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome back to the Southern Bible Thumper channel. For this upload, we're going to be reading Deuteronomy chapter 15. At the end of every 7 years thou shalt make a release, and this is the manner of the release. Every creditor that lendeth aught to his neighbor shall release it. He shall not exact it of his neighbor or of his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. Of a foreigner thou mayest exact it again, but that which is thine with thy brother thine hand shall release, save when there shall be no poor among you. For the Lord shall greatly bless thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it. Only if thou carefully hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe to do all these commandments which I command thee this day. For the Lord thy God blesseth thee, as he promised thee, and thou shalt lend unto many nations, but thou shalt not borrow, and thou shalt reign over many nations, but they shall not reign over thee. If there be among you a poor man of one of thy brethren within any of thy gates in thy land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not harden thine heart, nor shut thine hand from thy poor brother, but thou shalt open thine hand wide unto him, and shalt surely lend him sufficient for his need in that which he wanteth. Beware that there not be a thought in thy wicked heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of the release, is at hand, and thine eye be evil against thy poor brother, and thou givest him not, and he cry unto the Lord against thee, and it be sin unto thee. Thou shalt surely give him, and thine heart shall not be grieved when thou givest unto him, because that for this thing the Lord thy God shall bless thee in all thy works, and in all that thou puttest thine hand unto. For the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command thee, saying, thou shalt open thy hand wide unto thy brother, to thy poor, and to thy needy in thy land. And if thy brother, an Hebrew man, or an Hebrew woman, be sold unto thee, and serve thee 6 years, then in the 7th year thou shalt let him go free from thee. And when thou sendest him out free from thee, thou shalt not let him go away empty. Thou shalt furnish him liberally out of thy flock, and out of thy floor, and out of thy winepress, of that wherewith the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, thou shalt give unto him. And thou shalt remember that thou wast a bondsman in the land of Egypt, and the Lord thy God redeemed thee. Therefore I command thee this thing today, and it shall be, if he say unto thee, I will not go away from thee, because he loveth thee and thine house, because he is well with thee, then thou shalt take an awl, and thrust it through his ear unto the door, and he shall be thy servant forever. Also unto thy maidservant thou shalt do likewise. It shall not seem hard unto thee when thou sendest him away free from thee. For he hath been worth a double hired servant to thee, in serving thee 6 years. And the Lord thy God shall bless thee in all that thou doest. All the firstling males that come of thy herd and of thy flock thou shalt sanctify unto the Lord thy God. Thou shalt do no work with the firstling of thy bullock, nor shear the firstling of thy sheep. Thou shalt eat it before the Lord thy God year by year in the place which the Lord shall choose, thou and thy household. And if there be any blemish therein, as if it be lame or blind or have any ill blemish, thou shalt not sacrifice it unto the Lord thy God. Thou shalt eat it within thine gates. The unclean and the clean person shall eat it alike, as the roebuck and as the hart. Only thou shalt not eat the blood thereof. Thou shalt pour it upon the ground as water. Summarizing Deuteronomy chapter 15, Moses is continuing his farewell address to Israel. He's preparing them for the transition from wilderness wanderer to permanent resident in Canaan. We know that Canaan is the promised land because it was specifically referred to as the land that Israel is supposed to inherit in Numbers chapter 32, Numbers chapter 32, Numbers chapter 34, and Numbers chapter 35. Each of these chapters specifically list Canaan as the land that Israel will inherit by name. We know that Moses will die from his disobedience. God says this specifically in Numbers chapter 27. We also know that the act of disobedience that got Moses in this trouble was in Numbers chapter 20. That was when God told him to speak to the rock to get water for the Israelites, but instead he hit the rock. Aaron also died in Numbers chapter 20, and Miriam died in Numbers chapter 22. Or Miriam died in Numbers chapter 20 as well. So this is the vantage point that Moses is speaking from. He has sacrificed his opportunity to live as an Egyptian. So he also lost his 2 nephews in Leviticus chapter 12 and both of his wives. He had a wife, Zipporah. She was mentioned in Exodus chapter 2. And then in Exodus chapter 4, his sons were mentioned. We don't know how many sons he has, but his sons were mentioned in Exodus chapter 4. He had a second wife in Numbers chapter 12. She's unnamed, but these women or his children have not been mentioned anymore. So it seems that he's going to be dying by himself in a mountain after sacrificing what life he could have had to lead Israel. After all that, Moses can't enter the promised land. So Moses is speaking now to this second generation out of Egypt. So the generation that he left Egypt with, that crossed the Red Sea, those people have all passed. So this audience that he's speaking to now is the second generation. We know this because that was specifically mentioned in Numbers chapter 26. This means that currently the audience that Moses is talking to, these are the children of the people that left Egypt with him. Deuteronomy chapter 1 through 3. Forgive any debts after 7 years. This is called the Lord's release. This law only applies to Israel and not non-Israelites that might be residing in that territory. Verses 4 through 6. None of you will be poor as long as you keep God's commands. You will be a nation of lenders. You, Israel, will rule over others as opposed to being ruled over. Verse 7 through 10. If a fellow Israelite becomes poor, help him with a good heart. Do not help with the intent of receiving repayment in the 7-year Lord's release. Verse 10, do not feel grieved at this sacrifice because God will bless you for your obedience. So what this is saying is if someone becomes poor, that should not be considered a debt that should be repaid. It should not, or a debt at all. Verse 11, there will always be poor in the land. So Open your hand wide to the needy, to the poor. There will always be someone poor. Don't smile at that. So now this is a verse 12 is referring to slavery. So the way this chapter is constructed, it first starts out talking about forgive debts. Then if someone falls on hard times and they're poor, now this is talking about indentured servitude, because now this is if there's problems with lack of funds and a person has to become a slave now. Okay? So if a Hebrew be sold into slavery, they should only serve for 6 years, earning freedom in the seventh. Verse 13, do not send them away empty handed. Give them flock, food, and wine, and remember that Israel was once bondsmen. Israel, the children of Israel were once bondsmen. Just wanting to emphasize here that with the guidelines of slavery, they were only supposed to serve 6 years, being released on the seventh. Only 6 years. This was after we discussed having a debt, after discussing falling on hard times, being poor. Now we have slavery. 6 years. And once they complete their 6 years, don't send them away empty handed, because a slave cannot participate economically. So sending a slave away with nothing will probably lead them right back into slavery, because there's no other way to survive. Verses 16 through 17. If the hired servant wants to stay, pierce them with an awl in their right ear. And so this is what an awl is, a flute or a pipe. Verse 18, it shouldn't be hard to let the person go. Remember that they have served as a double hired servant. Verses 19 through 22, do not use the firstborn male bull or male sheep for work. Do not shear the sheep. Eat them in the place that God reveals, because God has not given Israel a place of worship yet, but he's going to reveal it to them once they go into Canaan. So once God reveals that, that's where you go to make all your sacrifices and to uphold the traditions that God is going to give them, or that God has given, but Moses is going to repeat because this is a second generation. Don't sacrifice animals with defects or disabilities, meaning if the animal is blind or the animal can't walk or some other disability. But if the animal has a defect, then anyone can eat it. But in verse 23, make sure to not eat the blood, pour it out on the ground. Ending with a dietary restriction. That is all I have for Deuteronomy 15. Thank you so much for taking the time to click on the video and watch it. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I love you. Me and you are going to have a wonderful day.